and welcome. So the first order, the first business today is the Karakia, and so I would ask Judd Bailey, please.
Kia ora, Alan. Kei te Karakia timitanga. Kia uru mai, ahau ora, ahau kaha, ahau maia, ki runga, ki raro, ki roto, ki waho, riri, hau pai Māori e. In English, fill me with vitality, strength, bravery, above, below, inwards, outwards, let the wind blow, peace be upon you. Kia ora no tātou.
Thank you, Judd. So now I will call for apologies, please.
Declaration.
Oh, you want to do the declaration? Okay, no, the next item is declaration of our new member, Jenny. So we will do that now.
Kia ora tātou. Me wakapuaki ana au Jenny Tamakihu. Ka mahi au I runga I te rākau pono me te tō kikitanga e ia ko ki pukinga mo oku mohiotanga mo te tino paenga o Whanganui Rural Community. I runga I nā mana tū me nā kauinga ka uia mai I au hei mema o the Whanganui Rural Community Board I raro I te turi kawanatanga a rohe. Te taurua mano, marua, te turi mohio o kawanatanga a rohe. Te tau ko tahi mano, I warau, waru te kau mā whitu, me ira a tū turi rānei.
Kia ora.
Thank you. Congratulations, Jenny.
No
That's
mai,
over
haere
here.
mai, welcome.
So now I call for apologies, please. So we've got one from Grant Skilton. So do we have any others?
None that I've received. Although perhaps I could double check the democracy box in case I've received something from Peter and didn't see it.
Yes. Okay. So well, we'll just leave it. We move a motion
I think we'll just move the second grant.
accepting the apologies. Is that the process?
Yes.
So all in favour? Oh no, we need. Yeah, sorry, we need. I'll move it. Do we need a seconder? Okay. All in favour?
Aye.
Carried. Thank you. Declaration of interest. Okay.
I'm not sure if I said, I'm a papa representative of Tama Upoko, Te Runanga o Tama Upoko.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. So what's the formal process? Do we?
I'm noting it.
Okay. So duly noted. So then we move on to the minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of December. Oh yes, we didn't have one in the last one. Turned into a workshop. So can someone move that they are true and correct record, please?
Yes.
And a seconder? Thank you, Sandra. And do we have any discussion? Okay, if not, we shall move the motion that there are true and correct record of our 7th of December meeting. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. So our next item is hearing from Horizons Councillor Alan Taylor. Welcome, Alan.
Thank you, Chairman. Where do you want me to sit? I don't sit there.
No, I think if you sit next to Charlie and push your button.
Good advice. Keep up.
So congratulations on your being elected to the Horizons Board, Alan. First time I've seen you since then.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I extend the same to all of you board members. Sometimes it's not that hard to get on the board, but however, that's the workings of democracy, and it's good to see the board operative and running, and Horizons welcomes its association with you, and I'm sure Councillor David expressed that at your last meeting with him. He apologises for not being here today, but we'll probably try to tag team this kind of thing through the year so that we can continually keep you updated on matters that are happening in our organisation, and you can grill us to your heart's content on those. I'm not sure what you really want me to speak on today. A lot of things have happened since I received the invitation from Diane, and particularly the cyclone and how that's impacted on Horizons work. So maybe I just a little bit about that. That event was pretty obviously very impactful on the total east coast of the North Island, and impacted on three regions or three territorial authorities in Horizons, on Tararua, Manawatu and the Rangitikei, more so than anywhere else here. At the moment, Horizons is attempting to get the Manawatu added to the emergency regions or emergency authorities declared in the national emergency with the legislation that's coming through, in the hope that that might assist in recovery money from central government, and a greater acknowledgement of the I guess the disastrous situation, and particularly in the Pohongona and Arua catchments. Of note probably for constituents here is that at this point we've ascertained from Horizons' perspective around about $9 million worth of damage, or a little more. That's to catchment schemes, and that assessment's ongoing, so it will climb above that undoubtedly. But that assessment's based on aerial work, aerial surveillance work, and quite a lot, nearly 200 site visits by Horizons officers, which has been quite a tremendous task and well undertaken by them. I would also suggest to you that the greatest damage was sustained in the Pohongona Arua catchment, around about $5 million worth, $1 million or so in Tararua, and nearly $2 million in the lower Manawatu. Yep, go for
What
it.
exactly has happened that's going to cost us? There's a stop banks and things like that, is it?
It's a mixture. Stop banks, channel gravel, erosion of the banks is quite significant, and also damage to the capital works in terms of needing some work done around the lower Manawatu. So it's a range of pretty much anything you can think that would happen with a river and river control or river management schemes. Yep,
Are
go
you
for
happy
it.
with that, Alan?
Easy for me, Charlie. Oh, okay, we can come to that. Not a great deal of slash damage. Slash was obviously more confined to the Hastings District Council North, although there is evidence of slash damage in our region, and but most of the timber damage on our rivers was sustained through willow movement and other tree movement. Whole trees have been uprooted and travelling in the rivers and done some serious damage to some of the infrastructure on them. It's a bit early for us to assess where we might be, I think, with slash damage, given the government's inquiry into it and where they come down. But I think I'd stand by the statement that it probably gets progressively worse as you move up into to the Gisborne area. So yeah, that's all I can tell you really about slash at this stage. So that's where we're at. We're currently assessing how we're going to fund and manage the recovery of those schemes, what we will do there, how much we will do there, and how we will approach the strategy for that recovery.
Do you have a fund
There is
for unusual events?
Yeah, there is. There's an emergency response fund was set up some time ago. We no longer rate for it, but there's money in that that could be utilised. Whether we use all of that or not will be a decision we will make tomorrow. How much of that emergency fund? It stands at, I think, around about $20 million. We, as councils, will have to decide whether or not we want to use close to all of that, or whether we use part of that and other reserves, because each of the schemes, separate entities as catchment schemes through the region, as Colleen will well know, have their own reserve funds, some of which will be would, if they were to pay fully for the damage that's been done and we were to complete the work in restoration, chew all their reserves up. Some don't have enough, so there'll be a deficit. So we've got to figure out how much reserve money, what insurance monies might come forward. We don't know what they will be yet, and my reading of that is because the insurance industry hasn't really got to the point of being able to tell us, given the load that's on them, and how that damage would be assessed. So there is insurance money that we can possibly use. There are scheme reserves that are rated for and targeted rated for. There is the emergency reserve, and we're also hoping to convince central government to come to the party. So there's quite a range or a suite of funding options. The constraints will be that it's getting towards winter. It's hard to do the work when you get into the wet season that might be needed, and also to some extent the capacity of being able to find contractors to do that work, given the demand across the whole North Island and not just our region, and with contracting capacity. We do hear calls at times for, why can't we farmers get in the river with the bulldozer and fix it ourselves? That's just not acceptable. It's no longer a way out of this problem, and we've got to be very careful what we do in rivers. They're pretty dynamic, and dynamic entities that, if you get something wrong there, it can go it can turn to real pear-shaped very, very quickly. So that's where we are at with the cyclone. It has taken a huge toll on our ability to do the other sort of the business as usual work with Horizons. We had quite a number of staff seconded to other regions as far away as Auckland after Cyclone Hale, to assist those our partners in environmental management with their recovery from events that occurred earlier, and through Cyclone Gabriel as well. As things are starting to come back to normal now, but as I said, the load on staff and our resources stretched thin anyway, as every territorial authority, even as in New Zealand, will tell you, you don't have the staff you need. Horizons is in the same boat. It's hard to get the staff we need to do the work that is expected of us. So we're thin on the ground to begin with.
Kia ora, Alan. Did we have a flood event out at Okoia during this last turbulent period?
The Cyclone
Yes.
Gabriel,
Yep.
not significant that I know of. You may be able to report something
No,
locally.
I just
no,
heard
I
that
don't know.
there was a flood
Essentially,
issue and-
yeah, no, I don't think so, Judd.
Okay.
Essentially, Whanganui got off pretty lightly, and it's interesting looking at the rainfall map of what happened. It was nothing more than probably what we would call a heavyish rainfall in the Whanganui catchment. The upper Rangatiki was quite heavy, and the Whanganui Rural was heavier, but over the ranges in Tararua it was double again. So essentially the demarcation line from the really heavy rains was pretty much the Rangatiki River and the northern part of that. Once you're down on the coast at Otaki, Levin Otaki area, residents reported nothing more than a good shower almost. So it was a very, very clear line of demarcation as to where the heaviest precipitation fell.
Is the Akatio area, is that in Horizons?
Yes,
So,
and
'cause
they
that was bad
suffered.
there, wasn't it?
They have suffered quite a lot. Yep. Mostly, my understanding of the Tararua area, it's damage caused by willow trees in the rivers, and also the loss of fences, the loss of land, and access more than any flooding. It certainly there was a bit of flooding, like in the river valleys, a little bit, but the largest damage, I get the impression, was around access to begin with. Fences down, slippage, and farmers not knowing where their stock were, not being able to move them, and the impact that has on the community and its social well-being is pretty significant there. It will take Tararua a while to recover from the event, as it will the more localised areas of the upper Pahongana and upper Rangatiki. Any more?
There's one thing I'd like a quick comment on is around the forestry slash. Do you think that the Horizons consenting rules around forestry slash sufficient in our region, and we'll just use perhaps Whanganui for this discussion, to prevent the sort of, or another way of looking at it, are we just as susceptible to the forestry slash issue if we were to get that sort of rainfall here as they were on the East Coast?
I can only offer you a personal comment on this, Mr. Chairman, and I would say that if we have plantations that are being harvested in close proximity to the largest water bodies or areas that will carry large volumes of water if the falls are very heavy, such as down the Escort, down the Tutaikuri in Hastings District Council, we would have those sorts of issues where forests have been harvested, and there'll be some big trees come down unharvested and into rivers as well. My view is that most of the forestry in the Whanganui district is not located in areas that would feed that sort of stuff into our rivers, but I can't swear to that. I'd have to have another look at the forestry location and where the rivers are and how that fits together as a bit of a jigsaw. I think a lot of our forestry is sort of inland Brunswick, up into the back of Pakaraka for Charlie's benefit, Maxwell, and the rivers and streams flowing out of that are quite small, and so you're not going to get such big deluges that will run as wide as, say, the Tukituk River or the rivers up around Gisborne.
So
that's a personal opinion that I can't.
So as far as you know, the rules for residue in the Horizons region are just the same as they are in the regions that got flooded. I imagine so, given I'm not part of
haven't been party to the issuing of forestry management plans when harvests take place, but they all have to conform to the national policy statement on plantation forestry management. So basically the rules are the same. Whether Whanganui is affected as much might be in different ways. And when I was here on District Council, I recognised that one of the issues we really had was the damage that forestry slash did to roads by clogging up water tables.
Yeah, we had that Waitotra issue a few years ago, which you would have been involved with.
Did the Waitotra River? Or
It did something to the... there was a big storm at Waitotra and it did something nasty to the road up there, I think. Anyone else recall?
we're in South Taranaki anyway, but...
Certainly.
In the olden days, post-harvest, we used to burn all the slash. Columns of black smoke polluting the atmosphere.
Right.
There's no slash. What, is there even discussing that again, or is that not to be talked about?
Maybe. I think I'd ask the emergency management control over there, what might happen if the fire gets away?
Oh, that's good. You know that, don't you?
Yeah, I wouldn't do it on some of our high country.
But we used to do it all the time.
Yeah.
We used to do it all the time, and there was fires going all the time in the summer.
Oh, sorry, Charlie, I've got your microphone.
And there was columns of
Okay.
smoke, and there was never a slash problem. So my question is why isn't that issue been raised, the possibility of burning again? And you would have been part of that.
Well, my argument would be you've got the risk of fire, and you're also contributing a huge amount to carbon emissions by burning the forest immediately.
So my understanding of the carbon emission from burning is in the short haul, it's no different in the long haul from rotting slash on the ground.
And you're probably right, because it will rot and go through the carbon cycle and into the atmosphere anyway. Look, we just know that they don't burn the slash now. There's got to be good reasons in the forestry industry for not doing it.
You've answered the slash question. Did you have anything else you wanted to talk to us?
I'm taking too much time.
No, I just thought we'd done the slash. We'll keep
Oh
moving.
yeah, you had. I noticed your minutes made a point around the consenting process.
Yes, that was there's been an issue where someone has been wanting to get irrigation water for a kiwi fruit development, and it's going to take 2 years or more. So I just quickly wondered if there was any updates on whether any sign that we're going to be able to improve that process.
To not put too fine a point on it, the improvement in that process will have to come mostly from the applicant's side. The review that Horizons carried out indicated, I think, two reviews indicated two central things. That yes, Horizons, like every regional authority, is stretched in terms of its resources to issue consents. But we're doing as well as any other region, or very close to, and our consents seem to be a little bit more complex than most others. And the second thing around that is that there was no identified legal or process shortfalls in the organisation. The problems occur when applicants don't understand or misunderstand the necessary process to go through in consultation with iwi, and that's a bit of a roadblock for some people. What Horizons has been suggested to us that Horizons does is develop some kind of overall resource that applicants can take a look at to see how they can ease themselves through the consenting process with iwi to begin with, how best to engage, and how to find out who you must engage with. And that's been part of the problem, is the lack of engagement, or the lack of knowledge how to engage, and a lack of knowledge around who to engage with. And on top of that, to be the other side of the coin is iwi often lack the resources to reply to requests for cultural impact assessments, etc., in a very quick and timely manner. And that's something that applicants, I think, could have a look at.
So do you think Horizons has a extra facilitation role in this process?
Yeah, it does, and we've noticed that. It's not required in any legislation, but it's something we have noticed, or we have noted, and we will attempt to do
So that's
to
something
improve
that
that.
you will be advocating on our behalf for.
Yeah, it's already noted and well taken account of, that will very hopefully, and I'm sure will improve.
It's great. Yeah.
It's, as I say, it's not something that the organisation is required to do, but it is something the organisation can do, because it's in a position to help applicants by doing that. We have to be very careful, because we, as an organisation, we cannot say you must talk to these people but not those. That's not the decision. The decision that what we have to put in front of people, or not what we have to, but what we can put in front of people is, this is the process you need to go through. These are the groups of people you may need to consult with, or engage with, and then consult with, and just do it in this kind of manner, and you'll find the process works so much more simple.
Okay, now I'm quite pleased to hear your response, because I've thought Horizons lacking in the facilitation area, but you're saying that you recognise that, and the organisation is keen to improve on that. So that's.
And a further point, Mr. Chairman, around consenting is that it needs to be made very clear to applicants that any consent you seek, whether you've had a previous consent or not for the same thing, is not a rollover. There's no such thing. Every consent must be treated as a new consent and go through the full consenting process. And that has become a much higher bar than it was when the first consents were first issued.
What does that really mean for the development or farming or horticulture in Whanganui? Because what you've just said sounds impossible to me.
Sandra, if you can tell me what you mean by
what
bit of it's impossible?
If you want to go into growing kiwi fruit, growing whatever you want, you'd like to, as in business, but what does that really say to the people who would like to do it? I mean, who have you got to go up against to get a consent?
You're really not going up against anybody. You're engaging with the people that are affected by your activity, asking them to provide their view of how it impacts on their culture, get the ducks lined up, and then if everybody's happy around what's been achieved at that point, the consent will probably be it'll just be a cakewalk. The difficulty occurs when people think they don't need to talk to tangata whenua and attempt to bypass or not fully engage in that process, and then things get sticky and wind up going to notification and hearing.
Why can't you and iwi be on one joint committee and you go and put your case for it there, instead of going here and here and here?
Hang on, I don't follow. Why can't I, or you mean as
Horizons,
be on a joint committee?
with iwi as far as going for consent?
No, because Horizons is not. Horizons is the consenting authority. It's got to be satisfied that all of the consenting process has been followed through in law.
Yeah,
We receive the consent application, then or the organisation does, and then looks at it to see that the whole process has been followed through correctly, with giving due effect to all of the legislation that affects consenting, which will be national policy statements, it'll be the RMA, the Treaty of Waitangi, it'll be quite possibly Te Awa Tupua,
Yes,
whatever
I think,
legislation
I
that,
think we might leave it there.
Yeah.
In that, what Alan's saying about trying to improve the facilitation is pretty much all we can expect from, or pretty much all they can really achieve in this process. The rest of it goes to what Alan's saying. It's complex.
it's complex, but you have to follow the law.
Yeah, and there is a lot of law around it. So I think we might leave that issue at this point.
That's good. Yep.
And
And-
if was in
Oh, you
very
had
quickly, have you
David raised something about rabbits, or you might have raised something with David about
you
rabbits.
better just quickly answer that.
It's
please.
not a, rabbits aren't an animal pest. Well, they are, but they're an amenity pest in the sense that if you've got them in your backyard, Horizons might help you eradicate them, but they're not going out and going to do night shoots or trapping like they do for possums or rooks. Or
It's not just rabbits, Alan. There's deer and possums, and I just wanted to know the structure of how Horizons was operating in that realm, because we haven't seen
Yeah,
anything for quite some time. Any engagement?
yeah, so they can cut this as short as possible. If you look at the Horizons 1 plan, go to the pest management strategy, the pest animal section of it is not long. It's quite clear and easy to follow, and it will tell you what we do and what is supposed to be done about the animal pests.
Right. I'm asking more in concern of neighbours that have asked, what's happening about our bloody pests issue?
I can deliver you the reports that come through once every 4 months in terms of what's been done and what's been achieved around each of those pest areas.
Maybe it's just something to pass on to those constituents that...
Okay, well, we'll make sure that those,
Squeaky hinge.
they come through in the minutes of my Integrated Catchment Committee meeting, and so you'll get that in the biosecurity report.
Excellent. Can't ask any more than that.
They used to shoot them, now they count them.
Okay, thank you. Bill, did you have a
Thank
question?
you.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Alan?
G'day, Alan.
Excuse
Hey,
me,
um,
Mr Chair,
will
could
you-
I just have one question for Alan?
Oh, sorry, I missed your...
Who's first?
Okay,
Jenny, yeah.
sorry, Jenny.
Kia ora,
Yes,
Alan.
okay, you ask Alan, and then Bill's got a question.
Okay, it's just on, can you tell me if Horizons has a complete hydrology map of the aquifers, all aquifers, and are they regularly monitored? And once consent is given, what part does Horizon play on the monitoring of the water tape?
I can't tell you that. I can't give you that information, but I can certainly find it out and send you an answer, Jenny.
Thank you, Alan.
Okay,
Okay, I'll send it to Diane, and she can circulate it. Would that be yeah?
Bill?
Yep. Just coming back to the cyclone, Alan. Were you aware of any problems with the Matarawa holding system during the cyclone?
I wasn't, but some of the officers might have been, and if it hasn't been reported to us specifically, Bill, it's because of the magnitude of the rest of the event across the region being so much greater.
And you guys are responsible for monitoring those systems, is that right?
In Matarawa, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't, but I'm not very familiar. I must admit, I'm not overly familiar with the Matarawa. We've got 35 schemes, and I'm trying to get my head around the bigger ones to start with. But I had an inkling that something was said about some issues with the Matarawa, but
I'll make some more inquiries.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Bill. We have to keep moving because Leanne, we have to get the next presentation out of the, she wants to get away at 3. So did you have another request, Jenny?
Me, no.
Yeah, okay. Okay, well, I think I'd like to thank Alan very much. There's some information there that I was very keen to
just
hear.
Jenny, you said you want to know if we had aquifer maps of the whole district. Is the aquifer monitored? Are the aquifers monitored? And what was the third?
And once consent is given, as a take from that consented bore, how is that monitored? And
Once the consent is taken, how is it monitored?
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Do they
like,
get the consent and just use it as they please, or how is that controlled and monitored? And who collects all that information?
Okay. So that would come under a regulatory process, or how they, monitoring and okay, after consent take. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Alan. Do we have to move this Rural Community Board receive the report? Thank you, and a seconder, and all in favour? Aye. Against? Carried.
Sorry, seconder was?
Mike, I think, or Bill? Mike. Absolutely, Alan, yeah, no. Okay, thank you. So now we're moving on to Leanne is going to give us an update on, we're just starting the process, the discussion process around Maori wards. And so Leanne's going to give us a bit of an update on that.
Kia ora koutou. I guess that's really what it is to bring your attention to the discussions that we're going out there to have conversations in the community around the appetite for Māori wards. And that will form part of the representation review, which will be carried out, I believe, next year. So I'm really wanting just to bring that to your attention for you to have the conversations in your community. We'll be organising a few events where we can invite the community and hear their views. We'll be going out and hopefully meeting at our marae. We've met with Tamaupoko last week or the week before, and really just wanting to bring it to your attention, and I guess for you to help promote those conversations in your communities. And we will definitely include any invitations or organised events that once we've confirmed them, to you, and would appreciate your support in distributing that as well. Any questions?
Thank you. Yes, any questions?
Is Ngāruru part of this?
The regional, the Whanganui District Council does encompass an area of Ngāroru and Ngāti Apa, as well as Aotearoa Paparangi. Yes.
Thank you.
What sort of time frame are we talking about?
It will be on the council agenda table at I think it's the 6th of December council meeting. So between now and November, we'll have the conversations and then present it to council no later than the 6th of December this year.
Notified of all the meetings and things that we can attend, or
there'll be public ones.
Yeah.
And yes, and you'll also be given a contact email should that be the way that you'd like to give feedback. We're also conscious that there's a lot of work going on, a lot of consultation and engagement around our leading edge and our annual plan. So we're conscious to not exhaust our community's time and see how we might work well together, rather than put pressure on specifically the Māori community, because that's more of a targeted audience for this conversation, and it's also a focused audience for many consultations that we do. So it's just ensuring we don't exhaust their time and energies with our demands of different parts of us wanting to have conversations.
So will we get regular updates of how it's progressing or trends? Or
I wasn't intending on that, but it's definitely something. Do you mean we as in?
As in the council and the Whanganui Rural Community Board, you know, so that we can sort of judge the feel of things?
I definitely look at it. My understanding is the council is decision documents, and you're wanting information. I think there's informal ways that we could probably share some information in an update, but I guess more importantly is, and we're open to have those discussions if there's of particular interest. But yes, we can look at ways as to how we can do that.
Yeah, even if it is just informally.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
be nice, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Yep, it sounds like that's all in front of us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, is there anything to move?
Yep, that the board received the report.
Okay, that the Whanganui Rural, so we need a mover for the recommendation. Thank you, that the Whanganui Rural Community Board receive the report, update on Maori wards. So Jenny's moved, so we need a set. Michael seconding. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. So now we're going to move on to Joe next, is she?
Joe is next.
Joe, hello. Thank you, Joe.
I didn't realise this was in the chamber, which is always fun. So this was just a kind of general update for rural connectivity. I'll just quickly go over some highlights in here. Crown Infrastructure Partners gave an update because around State Highway 4 and the Paraparas that there is 2 towers on there, one at Otoko and one at Kakatahi. They're expected to be online by the end of this calendar year. From the fibre network perspective, Tuatahi Fibre, also known as ultrafast fibre, were successful in tenders to extend the fibre network out from the city boundaries. So part of that is out Westmere Way and part of it kind of Brunswick, Roberts Ave kind of way. I spoke with Tuatahi Fibre on Friday, I think it was, and they said that that is scheduled for a design and build starting from May this year, and that normally takes up to 6 to 12 months to get that network live. I put in an update here about the remote user scheme, which I discussed back in December, which is another kind of hole plugging exercise by the Crown Infrastructure Partners around trying to get those people who do not have any sort of options for broadband connection to be able to apply for a $2,000 fund. As I mentioned last time, there is the ability for people with poor connections to also apply for that, although they haven't said what poor connectivity is. They still haven't decided what that is. But from my perspective, I recommend if anyone apply for that, and the form is attached to this, because CIP will then either tell people what their options are or look at it a bit further. And in addition to that, it's quite useful to have the data around the speed tests. So in the form, it's got CIP's form for applying for the remote user scheme, but I've also put in ways that people can speed test their internet if they do actually have some sort of connectivity. And also you were presented with a plan for Mowhanau Beach around how we could collect connectivity data for both broadband and for them cell phone connectivity. Which is attached there as well. While the dates in that plan have now passed, that plan is able to just be adapted to the dates and used. And the same principle applies, that it's really about being able to engage with the community at their level, with people who are trusted and respected, and get the data. Because, as an example in there, Kaiana Roa, CIP is telling us that there's sufficient connectivity out there, but the community is telling us otherwise. So I'll sit here and keep saying it, wax lyrical. It's about actually getting that data, getting that experience, and pushing that up to central government. And I do think that we're seeing the benefits of doing that. For example, with Tuatahi pushing out the fibre network, and also I'm aware of there is things being looked at in Whanganui Beach as well for connectivity. So that is my update, and I can take any questions or thoughts or comments.
Jenny, did you want to ask, have a discussion on the best way of getting that information through to the people that you're aware of up the river?
Yes, so there's some black spots up the river, and thank you for sending this form through, Joe. And so, do you mind, I was thinking of just posting it on the River Road page? And
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
that's fine.
Yeah, and then they can just email that back to me, and I can put it all together and,
Yeah, well,
and send it
they'd
out.
only get internet when they come to town.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, so I'm super keen. We found with Kaiwi Whanganui Beach that posting it on their Facebook page, Bruce being at the camp, he's a very well respected person, and that helps rather than someone like me coming and going do this. So yeah, using those relationships, those pages, those connects that you have already is definitely the best way.
that's great. So, is there opportunity for them, if they're not quite savvy, to come into the council? Get some assistance, or
yep.
it's probably just with their GPS?
Yeah, definitely. Or if there was an opportunity that you wanted me to go up the river and do that, I can do that as well. So we can, because it gives an opportunity. I find them face to face, people actually sharing their experiences helps as well. So I'm always open to do that if someone wants to invite me there. So.
It's just trying to get them all there at the same.
Yeah.
I'll let them know though.
Yeah,
Okay.
bring some cake.
Yes, well, I think, Jenny, we should do some work on following up on that, perhaps trying to organise something so that we can take Joe up there.
Okay then, yeah.
I'd be, if she's made the offer, I think we should give some consideration as to how we could make that work.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, there's
thanks.
a lot going on, right? So you've got the annual plan. We're talking about Māori wards. Like, there's the perfect time for it just to be a reach out and like do some community engagement in this space.
So, just back to the Kongaroa situation. There's been talk of meeting some people,
Yep.
But that hasn't happened yet, has it?
No, so I just need to arrange some calendars.
And so on the mobile phone aspect of that, there's data we can collect to try and make some impression on to get that improved, isn't there?
Yeah, so with cell phones, you can go out with a tablet with an app on it, and it will just constantly bounce off the cell phone towers, and it'll tell you if it's dark or if it has got some sort of connectivity. CIP has said to me that there will never be 100% connectivity on state highways or roads, so there will always be some sort of black spots. So there's got to take that into account of what the government's willing to cover versus what's actually there now. But because I don't know the area, that's where it's good to go out and look at those things. That just reminds me of something that I think it was Friday, or was yesterday actually, Vodafone, which is now One New Zealand, has just done a deal.
I was just going to ask you about that.
With Starlink, which would then give satellite text messaging across the whole of New Zealand. I imagine that will be incredibly expensive, but it is something from a resilience perspective that's pretty cool. For me, the downside is they're going to put more junk in space, so give and take. But there's constantly things happening in this space with satellite and Starlink that will offer other opportunities, at least in an emergency situation.
Kia ora, Joe. What do we need to progress Kongaroa's issue?
Just need to arrange a meeting. I've just been a bit hectic the last couple of weeks.
So have we
I know,
all,
yeah. So between me, you and David, if we arrange some time with the person who raised the issue with us, we can do that as soon
I'll
as
get onto
possible.
that and see if we can get a meeting.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else like questions of Joe? Okay, that's very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Kia ora.
So will somebody move, please, that the Whanganui Rural Community Board receive the report Rural Connectivity Update March 2003. Peter Oscom and seconded by Sandra. So any further discussion? Okay, well, I'll put the motion. All in favour? And against? Carried. Thank you. So now we're going to move on to Tim. Certainly your area's been in the headlines a bit lately.
Yeah, it's quite a notable uptake of renewed interest, one would have to say, across a wide spectrum of things. I can probably answer a few of the questions that were raised earlier as well by Mr Ashworth to Alan too. Just brief summary, we started with weather events quite early in the year. There was 2 very notable downpours about a week after the Auckland first event that hit us locally, one in the urban area and then one primarily in the Okoia area that you mentioned. That was on the Friday from memory of Waitangi weekend. They were noticeable in the fact that while we've had very similar before, they're very localised, very heavy downpours. The urban one was in the middle of the day and was well noted by many people. The Harper Street kayak zone, for example, that you can see on social media and a few other ones. But we've had these in other locations. While we're responding to that, at about 5 p.m, a second downpour hit the Okoia area and into the Matarawa's catchment. Both those events were quite notable. While local, we were looking at between 60 to 80 millimetres of rain landing in under 15 minutes, which is huge. And that tends to overwhelm any system, which is why a lot of people got their garages wet. Low-lying areas did get what we call nuisance flooding. A few houses were directly impacted. The Matarawa itself in that second event, at where we recorded, I think it's number 3 line, went higher than the 2015 flood level. It went to, I think, 2.4 to 2.5 metres there, where it was only just, in the past, we've been, let's just say, quite worried when it gets close to 2 metres. The diversion that's been put in there since 2015 did its job. There was no flooding while we had staff out there monitoring, and we had some plans prepared, particularly in the urban boundary interface with people's garages and sheds. It never in the urban area went over any stop banks. However, in the Okoia Valley area, Longacre and other places, for about the 5th time in the last 18 months, we had quite heavy inundation on some of the paddocks and over some of the roads. Because of the sheer volume of water in that short time period, it was a bit of an overland flood in some areas, but again, very, very localised. You could travel 2 kilometres and it wasn't raining, and then you'd hit waist deep flood water going across the road. We have in previous events had to evacuate individual houses, so we pushed some staff out there very quickly in vehicles to keep a close eye on the situation and communicated with some of the locals who were cut off. Most of them know to basically stay put and don't challenge the roads. I am unaware of any longer term issues there, any of those areas that were impacted, but it is something that we've seen happen in the last probably 2.5 years, a change in weather patterns.
So those situations, they're not uncommon, and you've got a good plan and all the locals know
Most of the locals do.
what to do.
Yeah, we do of course have more people moving into those rural areas. Some of them in areas that I personally would not live in. I prefer to be above, up on high. So I think some of them got a very good education of the potential risk, but I'm well aware that there was, in those areas that were impacted, people were very safe looking after each other. We did have some contacts with some of our rural contacts, and that last event I don't believe we had to actually evacuate anybody. I'm unaware of any houses that were impacted, although I'm well aware a number of sheds and paddocks, etc., were impacted.
So there's the right people have got radios and all, that sort of thing.
Yeah, we do have, for example, we've got radio operators in Okoia and a number of other places. A network for VHF, about close to 25 radios out in our rural area now. That's really the emergency backup communications. When the cell phone towers are still working, we've still got people that will ring in, but also we monitor and are on a number of Facebook pages, like the River Facebook pages and that, and we monitor those on a regular basis most of the time. And when we're seeing trouble, we'll go to those as well. That probably went past a lot of people other than the urban environment. because those areas that flooded in Okoia do flood a fair bit, and by the next day the water was down back across the roads. It occurred mainly at night time. But the roads were closed. There was some local rescue people using tractors to move, I think, a truck to get one road clear. That was one truck stuck in floodwaters and a few other minor things like that. But the locals out there are pretty well used and robust to that sort of thing. So that was the localised events. Of course, after that, Cyclone Gabrielle came about. We identified fairly early on that it wasn't going to have a huge impact on our river systems. We were cautious though, because if you can predict where cyclones are going, you're pretty good. But we had about 85 to 90% chance on the Saturday that we weren't going to be terribly impacted. We did stand up and prepare some options, including some catastrophic flooding plans which were dusted off. And we got some of our communications networks ready. Once we'd identified that the problems were elsewhere, we just had to deal with some of the, I'll call it the edge rivers, the Turakina, the Whanganui, working with Ruape District Council, monitoring those. They went up, but they didn't go over the banks other than onto a few paddocks. But we did dispatch people out there to talk to the locals and just to monitor it beyond the normal river management system. As soon as we were happy with those, we started deploying staff to the east before being asked, along with our Red Cross team deployed. We threw a welfare manager out with Red Cross. We deployed operational staff. Basically the people we sent were our most experienced staff across a wide range of areas, but we could only send those we could afford to send, being 1 foot on the ground here with looking after our district. But we did send a large percentage of our capability across to the Hawke's Bay, and we continued to do so for about 2 or 3 weeks, people taking turns to head over there. What it did help us do is through Anthony and his team, we managed to actually field-proof, combat-proof, whatever you want to call it, a lot of our remote systems and our management systems. We actually physically utilised in Wairoa and other places, as well as visiting farms, doing welfare needs assessments for cut-off and remote locations. And the system that we have was field-proven with that, which was good for us. It gives us a great deal of confidence with it. Just a thought with the cyclone. If my numbers aren't accurate, they're based on my eyeball of it, but effectively their areas that were worst hit, we're looking at probably twice the level of rain we got in 2015 in a 24-hour period. So when you look at your roads, your infrastructure, your trees, your willows, your landslides and slips, and you think back to what we went through in 2015, just visualise in your head doubling that. And are we ready to have that if it came down our side of the coast? That's the reality of these bigger cyclones and the reality of what impacted over there. And that does pay to take into account when we look at it and we look around our own local environment. I will intend to put together a wee exercise for our staff based on that sort of scenario later on this year, just to see how we would adjust our plans if we anticipated something like that monster hitting us. Apart from that, really, are there any questions?
So do you do any sort of, how shall I put it, those sort of rainfall intensities are normally associated with weather systems coming out of the tropics?
Yes.
And so they've usually got north and northeasterly sort of lean on wind direction. So do we have data which might indicate for our situation that where that sort of event might come from? Because
we do.
My assessment is that those sort of rainfall levels are less likely for us than areas exposed to the north and the east.
There are a range of systems that I watch, or that we watch, through probably about 4 or 5 different Met organisations and computer models. One is a stream of events that comes down effectively in a straight line from Coffs Harbour. And if we have a blocking high to our east, that's a 2015 event. Your cyclones have a certain part of the cyclonic storm system is where the two most damaging things occur, which is the storm surge, if you're at the coast, and the rainfall. And as it's turning around in a circle, where that moves will determine where the worst of the damage is. That's what hit the Hawke's Bay, was that the rain in that circle coming in from a slightly different direction. But I do note in a few years ago, the East Valley got hit by a weather system coming up from the south. Again, a thin, narrow band that passed across Ruape district and damaged a bunch of farms on a very narrow field. It's about 20-30 k's long by about 5 or 7 k's across. Caused a localised flood in our main awa down here, not enough to do more than go over the boardwalk, and it was from a southerly direction. So we watch every weather system, and we watch it from when they form either up in the subtropics or if they're coming at us from Tasmania. And we watch them closely. Our degree of suspicion, I'd put it bluntly, is we're above average suspicious for any weather system.
So our probability of a major event is no less than anywhere else in New Zealand?
We've got some advantages of where we're being. Traditionally, they will hit Northland towards Gisborne and then swing across to the east. That is the traditional pathway. However, they can, and they have done in the past, come down our coastline. I think, again, 2018 with the wind system that took Taranaki, there were two smaller cyclones that came down the west coast. Or one came down the west, one came down the east coast. They do tend to swing out towards the east, but it's not guaranteed, so we've always got to be prepared for that. And with a warming Tasman Sea, at a certain time of the year, the intensity is stronger and the accuracy where it lands and where it moves is a little bit more erratic.
Peter?
My observations of the Cyclone Gabriel was that once it was over, it was the local communities that rallied around the maraes and that sort of thing that people went to and got assistance. Is there like your personal emergency kit at home? Is there such a thing for those sort of communities? And
depends where you are. When a community rallies around, often it's a marae if it's in the right location. Over on the east coast, for example, they're just outfitted through TPK Te Punga Kaukari, about 30 different community shipping containers that were specifically designed based on their learnings of the previous few years, and some of them had only arrived a few weeks before the cyclone did. There was one that I'm aware of, one marae, that hadn't been opened because it had only arrived and they were waiting actually to go through the system and find out what they could use in there. A lot of it was based on water retention or winning drinking water in those systems there. We have a copy of it from Ben, who's the emergency manager who was basically conducting that activity. Some other areas, maraes and communities, were just simply too badly impacted to be of assistance, and people went to the nearest close community to do that. The foundation for all civil defence starts with the community. Your personal preparedness at home, in your neighbourhood, on your farm. Anybody who is not impacted, if they can look after themselves, preferably for me for a week, but at a minimum 3 days without needing outside help, is one less person that you need to throw helicopters resources at, that you can then focus on those people who are the badly impacted ones. The more people that have got that personal level and family level of preparedness, the more we can focus on that. Caches, etc., are a bit of work, and if you have them in the wrong place, they're also floating out to sea, as a colleague of mine found out in 2015. Probably South Beach through to Foxton is where some of his personal supplies ended up. But we have been working with some of the communities, particularly upriver, for quite a while on this, with their own resilience and their ability to deal with the consequences, which for them is often being cut off. Not so much for being flooded out or with landslides, but with being unable to move, often more than 1 or 2 kilometres in any given direction. And a lot of our radio network has also been built up to allow for that.
So there is ongoing work with our local communities and
Yes.
things, and upgrading them and making sure the resilience is there. should they need it.
Yeah, if you don't include the community at the start, your response will never go well. You've got to have that as a foundation.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, Bill.
Yes, thanks for that feedback, Tim. That's really good. From here, looking at what happened over in the Bay, I think the major criticism would have been, and correct me if I'm wrong here because I'm just a layman, right, is the lack of warning, that people were surprised by what took place and they weren't expecting to have to evacuate and that sort of thing. And I guess that's kind of the key to civil defence, isn't it? That you've got to have some lead-in time and you've got to have some plans up your sleeve as to what's going to happen.
Yeah, when you think back to it for yourselves, the entire North Island got quite a number of warnings for a week prior, and they built up. I think some of the words were, this will be a major event in a number of areas and regions. And that was emphasised quite highly, with the exception of a couple of radio stations, with people who are not experts in that area. But to be honest, most of us don't pay attention until something comes literally on our horizon. That is human nature. I am naturally one of those people, by the result of my own history and my job, someone who looks at this stuff and doom and gloom merchant, for want of a better term. But with the warnings there, we'd already done our own home preparation based on just what we got on the media, as opposed to our own looks at it from a professional level. But when you've had small floods before, a big flood is a heck of a shock, and no, you don't get a lot of warning. It's like earthquakes. Most of us have been through small earthquakes, but when you go through a 7-point or above and it's close to you, it's a completely different ballgame. And that shock and surprise and the lack of warning is part of it. When you get a flood like that, which breaches and overtops stock banks and is easily double what they expected, then yeah, you don't get a lot of time to react. That is unfortunately the nature of disasters like this. And this is why, again, emphasise, if you're at home, just look around. If you've got rivers nearby, or if you've got anything that is a potential issue or risk, is have a plan. Have a place to go to on high ground if you're on low ground. Have communications, backup capabilities. Don't be completely reliant on any one power system. Build that resilience in, and try and, if you're going to get impacted, you often won't get a choice. It's going to happen to you. But again, if you're not impacted and the person beside you is, have that capability to help your neighbour. But be aware that we are very poor at managing risk when it comes to our own eyeballs. That poor gentleman that got disappeared for a few weeks trying to get home. Most of us think we're good four-wheel drivers, but you can't drive through floods. The reality of these events is they are a lot more dangerous, but by the time you realise it's dangerous, you're in the middle of it. But again, we may get 2 or 3 more cyclones, and they won't impact us. They'll swing out wide, or there'll be nothing events. So it's just retaining that memory of when things go bad. They can go bad really quickly.
Thanks, Tim. Just on a point you made earlier, I wonder how many people could actually read a weather map when they see it on the TV. I wouldn't actually read it. I would suggest probably not very many.
Yeah, and I'd think back, if you think back to, like, let's say Auckland's first event, having lived in South Auckland, Friday afternoon of an Auckland anniversary weekend after 12, if you're not on the road heading out of Auckland, you're not getting out of Auckland, and suddenly you get a weather event there and then. Now, that people heading out are not just the homeowners, but that's also the people that you would normally have as volunteers, as community leaders, etc. I'm not pointing at any one particular individual. That's a big ask. Murphy's Law says it'll happen on a long weekend at 5 o'clock in the morning, which is then becomes, I would say, our problem, but that's just something that sometimes we have to deal with and manage with. And most disasters, they are very, very hard work, and to get stuff right, it's probably not all the time, it's probably not a disaster.
Okay, so Tim, do you think we've potentially going to learn anything from what's happened on the East Coast and that's going to make a difference to how we prepare here. And perhaps should we be doing a bit more to try and get the message out, particularly to our to the rural people, and try and engage a bit more. And I'm thinking in sort of pushing there's a number of messages, generators, and the things that you've mentioned. Is there a space for us to get in, to try and get in here and try and get a bit more of a message out? And you would be key in that. So have you got any plans on how we might?
There is.
You've already mentioned the issues. Yep. You just can't get people to.
We are in a busy world. That consequence thinking of what ifs and round to it's, that's pretty normal. From the rural perspective, it's that awareness that look over at the bay, look what they've learnt the hard way there, and what can we do to minimise or mitigate that to ourselves individually as a person, as a family, as a farm business. Now, there are some things that will always put some of our businesses, etc., at risk. For example, the river valleys have got benefits for certain stock. We, as a emergency management organisation, will do what we can when it comes to giving warning where we can, with that ability or the understanding of the community that if we give you an extended multi-day warning, the accuracy is going to be correspondingly a lot less. Like in 2017, it looked pretty dire, but we managed to dodge that bullet. There is that risk. And no understanding as a community that we won't get it right every time, but we use those things as practicing. For communicating with our people out in the rural areas, it's a bit of that. But one of the key ones is also using, for example, this board to increase our network. So I have here, this is a rural farm map that we got a few years ago, and we actually used it during one event. Within a few weeks of getting it, there's over 400 farm contact addresses on there. Now, it's out of date within 6 weeks of buying it. It's an incredible amount of work put together, and while it looks good, it's not an efficient way of getting hold of our rural community. When we need to communicate to the public anywhere, we use multiple means in a hurry. But one of those ones that works particularly well before an event is phone trees through known community leads or hubs. That's certainly how we work up the hour and across into some of the other local areas that we have rurally. If we could work with this board to establish that a little bit stronger.
Because the message is right out there now.
Yep.
If we're going to try and get out to our communities and do a bit more planning and communicate with them, now would be quite a good time.
Now is a very good time to do that while it's still fresh.
Because everybody's thinking about it. So,
yep.
Do you have any ideas or suggestions as to how we could facilitate a bit more communication with our rural communities now that this is a topical issue and people might be interested in listening?
I'm quite happy to jump on board with any rural meetings, just to basically introduce that stuff and show some of the tools that pre-exist, or if you wish to, if you've got a community group or a local area that wants, while it's on top, to see what we've picked up, particularly from our the rural outreaches that our team did, Ants and his team did over there, what we can give to help people prepare. Happy to jump in and work with you for any meetings like that. Okay. At any time, to be honest.
Yep. Thank you. Did you have something else, Bill?
No.
Okay. Anyone, any other questions of Tim? Okay. Thank you, Tim. That's excellent.
This was updated, I think 2018. I'd rather not throw it out, because at least it gives us, we can find people sometimes. Most of your names are on there, by the way, any phone numbers, just so.
We've got some cell phone numbers at work now too. Okay, so I need a mover that the Whanganui Rural Community Board receive the report, Civil Defence Emergency Management Rural Update. So if I can have a move, Sandra, and a seconder, Michael. Any further discussion? All those in favour? Aye. And against? Carried. Thank you. Diane, I see we've got updates from Rural Community Board advocates, but Elise, Elise might prefer to give her strategy and policy update now, do you
Just
think?
mustn't forget the meeting schedule. if you
Oh,
want.
no, sorry, we'll do the meeting schedule and then,
That's it.
and then Elise, you might like to be after that. Would that be right? Yep. Okay. Sorry, I jumped ahead there. Has everybody had a look at the proposed meeting schedule for the rest of the year? May the 17th, June the 28th, August the 9th, September the 20th and November the 1st. And I think they're all Wednesdays, is that right? Yeah. Wednesday suits me. I think we've been Wednesdays. Yeah. So do we have any discussion around that? Okay, so if we could have a mover that we adopt that meeting schedule as per the attachment. Charlie's going to move it, and a seconder please. Sandra? All those in favour, aye?
Aye.
And against? Carried. Thank you. I think we'll, if it's all right with you, Elise, you might like to go next, and then if you've got other things you need to do, then you can go and do them.
I'm happy to stay. I do want to just plug my computer in here, if that's okay, so I can bring things up on the screen. That one working? So kia ora koutou, I'm the policy manager here at Council. Nice to see you all this afternoon. So I'm just going to give a brief update on the policy and strategy work underway. The main thing that we have on the go, which has, I think, already been mentioned, is our annual plan consultation. So our annual plan is when we set our budget for the year, and we're at year 3 of our long-term plan. So we'll be launching into our long-term plan process this year to start the long-term plan next year. So I know these things roll around quite quickly, and it's obviously been a pretty significant year in terms of all of the changes that have happened economically and environmentally. So I think everyone is very well aware of the cost of living situation at the moment, and while Council has seen escalating prices for everything across the board, from our interest rates to insurance to cost to build, councillors are also really, really aware that that is the situation for everyone, and everyone is facing the cost of living increases. So with that in mind, they've been through the council budgets, and I think there was some messaging from the Mayor around how the initial budget was pretty high, in the high teens. That was brought down to an 11% rates rise, and after some further hard work, it's been brought down to an 8.2% average rise for the residential sector. So just keeping in mind that is average, and it's about $5 a week for the residential sector. There is a huge amount of variation within that. And I'll also show you on the screen when I can the variation for different sectors as well. So we have opened our consultation yesterday, and it will run through until 30 April. And one of the big things that we're looking for feedback on is around the aviary at Virginia Lake. So you may have read about this as well in the media. Council commissioned a report from a zoologist to find out about what is the current state of the aviary and what would we need to do to lift the current standard of care. And the report shows that the birds are in distress and leaving the aviary in its current state is not a viable option because it doesn't meet current animal welfare standards of care. So a big question for the community is what sort of investment do we need? Does the community want us to make in the facility? Does the community want us to bring that aviary up to a high standard, which includes an educational function as well? Or is the community interested in a in-between option, I suppose, which is about making some improvements to bring it up to a standard of care that will address those animal welfare concerns, or would the community prefer that we close that facility? So it's been reported, I think some people said it's closing. That decision has not been made. That decision is something that we're putting out for public consultation. So we really encourage people to put in their feedback on where they think we should be going. Obviously, each of those options comes at a different cost to council to be able to employ staff who are sufficiently trained up to care for the birds, as well as the capital investment in rebuilding the aviary. So if you'd like, we're running if you'd like to also talk in person, there's a number of engagement events that I'll highlight, and we're also looking at joining the mobile library bus, which travels around in rural communities to get out there as well and reach as many people. So I know the mobile bus travels out to Ratana, Whanganui, Mofano, Opokonaro, Brunswick, and a whole lot of other areas. So we will be out and about to try and reach the rural community, but we'd really appreciate your help in sharing it with your networks and getting as much feedback there as possible. I finally just wanted to mention that we're also consulting on fees and charges. So these are fees like building consents, cemeteries, health registration fees, and many of these haven't changed for a long time, and in light of inflation, we've reviewed them to ensure that the users of these fees are paying their fair share, and that we've realigned them with the current costs to actually provide those services. So both consultations close midnight, Sunday 30 April. Strongly encourage you to share this information around, and finally you may want to put in your own board submission on this. I'll let me know whether that's something you'd like to do, and I can help facilitate it. So I'll put that over to you. And I will just bring up the form, so we can, hopefully this works. Hopefully it's as straightforward as that. So Diane can probably send these around, or I can, but you'll find on, it's not working?
The screens are on.
Oh, there we go. So you'll find on our Have Your Say page our annual plan there. So it's all up there, everything that I've covered, and nice and easy to make a submission there online. Some people think it's quite a process, but it isn't. It's actually pretty straightforward. We have a consultation document where we've outlined the process that council's been through. We've outlined all of the deferrals and the proposed cuts, and the average rates increase there. And then we have a separate page for the fees and charges there. So it's all up here on the Have Your Say page. I don't think I need to say too much more, but I just wanted to highlight that, and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Is the information you've given this year, is this the same as always been done, or has there been some extra stuff put in here?
Yeah, that's a good question. I do think we've put extra in here. So what we've tried to do, sorry, I skipped over the QV part. We've really tried to give more information about how rates are set, and as well as the QV process, because we had two processes going on at the same time. So I do think we've provided a bit more information, as well as this process that we've been through here of reducing costs. I
don't recall that before giving quite some information on.
Yeah, it is.
Where
you're
we've
right.
Tried to save and where we had to put things up.
You're right. This is new information, and it has been a very thorough process this year, and that was because of the very strong desire to see that we can get the rates as low as possible while still delivering on all the essential things that we have to deliver on and keep the water running and keep the roads, functioning and whatnot. There was a very clear direction from elected members that the rates rise come down as much as possible.
Yes, I went to all the workshops, I think, and I thought the process was very thorough, and the 12 councillors, excellent. I really can't praise them enough for the approach that they all took. And we had our very own Peter Oscom. He had a view, and we all know what it was, that he didn't get a lot of support, but that's the process. So those are my comments. With the public submissions, are we as community board people encouraged to come along and hear those, or the ones that are in council, or is there any point in us being involved at that level?
Yes.
Because we have submissions in here, don't we?
Yes, they probably will be held in here on 10-11 May, so that's the next steps, public hearings on 10-11 May. We are trying to deformalise them a bit because I know it can be quite intimidating for people to have to come into the chambers and sit there, so it may look a bit different and feel a bit different to previous hearings, but certainly you would be more than welcome to attend.
Cool.
Yeah, at least I get everybody's done everything they can, so I'm not criticising anybody, but aren't you going to be sabotaged, just totally sabotaged by those QV values? You are, aren't you?
The QV values are set by QV. It's independent of council. We do not set those, and we have no say in what those are, and there is a huge variation. So if I point you to this page here, if you can see that on the screen, we're seeing properties that land value has increased 58% and their capital value 51%, but this example, which is a real example, will actually see a negative rates. They won't see a rates rise, they will be paying less, through to your large property here on the far right, which has seen a land value increase of plus 288%. They are seeing a weekly change of almost $32. Now that, in terms of how the land value and capital value has been done, that's been set by QV, and I know there's a very thorough discussion with QV here. I think you attended. The way in which that is set is beyond our control at this point. What we have been saying to people is, if you have concerns, please lodge those with QV before 14 April, if you have concerns about how your land capital value has been assessed. And if you have concerns about your rates, please get in touch with council. We don't want people to be just sitting there. We want people to reach out and let us know, and our rates team is here to help as much as we can in this situation. So that's really the key message. Yeah.
We've been a bit unlucky in that the revaluation has come at the same time as the high inflation rates call that council are having to make. So those two factors have made it more complicated. But council, in my view, are doing their best at trying to get that message through, that the valuations are going to make a difference, and there will be a big variation, as that slide shows. And in the farming scene, I've had one chap ring me, and his rates are going to go from 20,000 to 35-40 because of the valuation situation, the revaluation situation. So it's a real issue. Okay, so if there's
I just have one random question. So, how are in-ground swimming pools and their water use rated or assessed for rates?
The public swimming pools
No.
or private?
Private.
Well, we don't have water metering in council, but in terms of property value, how that is assessed?
In terms of rating system.
I'm not sure, sorry. I'd have to ask our rating team how that's taken into account. Yeah. I have to come back to you, Jenny.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Unless any of the councillors
I presume it's just completely related to the whether it adds value to the property.
I think that would come through the valuation of the property. land value of the property. But yeah, we'll need to come back to you.
I suppose there is one point we should just make here, and that if anybody's not happy with the evaluation, there is a objection. What's the term? There's an objection. There's a process where you can get it reassessed, and I've had to do it with one of mine. It's very straightforward.
So for clarity, we've got a rate increase, but because of the capital values variation, the rate take there's no different. The rate take's the same, but it's just if you've got a high capital value, you're going to be paying more rates than someone's got a really low one. That's how it works, isn't it?
Yes.
Almost right. So it's the percentage increase. So if you have a very high value property, you will still be paying more rates than a low value property. However, if your property has increased by 200% in value and my property, say, has increased by 50%, the percentage increase that you will see will be higher than mine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the council rate take is the same.
Yes, the council rate, well, this is where we get slightly confused. The council overall rate take has had to increase by 8.2%.
Sure,
across the board to cover all costs. However, it looks different for every property because of the QVs. Let's say next year we need to do an 8% rates rise, then that's just flat across the board. And, well, not across the board because there's different rating percentages for different properties. But let's say it was an 8% for residential, then everyone would see that. Whereas this year when people get their bills, they'll be seeing quite a variation. Now, we do have a tool. I didn't pop it up there, but we have a tool that people can go to and they can pop in their property. So this is it here. The property rating search. And I encourage people to actually pop in their address there to see what their rates are going to be. It will tell you what your current rates are and what your proposed rates will be. So that's it there online. So any property owner can do that. And that's going to give you your specific information rather than what you think it might be. Because there's also that misconception where people are looking at their properties and going, oh, they've increased 50% in value, I'm going to see 50% more in my rates, which is also not true. And as per those previous examples, there's huge variation. So we encourage people to actually look up their own properties individually.
Michael?
Lise, just getting away from the rates, coastal erosion, what's happening there?
Thank you, Michael. I thought you would ask me. So last year we commissioned, at Kaiwi specifically, you're interested? Yeah. So last year we commissioned a report from Tonkin and Taylor to help us assess some proposals put forward by the community about different management options, such as looking at improving the seawall or even potentially putting in a groin. We commissioned that report October, end of last year, and we're still waiting for it to come back. And as soon as it does come back, I reassure you, we'll send it on to the Whanganui community and we'll meet up. But I know it's top of mind, and I'm sorry it's taken this long, but we have been pressing and you know, we've made it really clear that this is really important to the community. And I think in light of the conversations we've had with Tim and, you know, the likelihood and frequency of storms, you know, yet to come, I know that this is really top of mind, so it will be a priority.
We've been lucky. We've had that sand held up there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's been very minimal.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Thank you.
I'm just going to make one comment. The rural rates increase, I think, is 7.6%, and a high proportion of rural rates go to roading. The increase in the roading budget that this rate is based on is way below inflation. So by definition, that means there will be less money spent on our roads in the next year. So I am quite concerned about that, and so I'm just making that point. How it's going to manifest, we have no idea. But just so that you're aware that, in my view, that is the situation. Okay, so if there's no further discussion, I shall ask for a mover for the recommendation that the Whanganui Rural Community Board receive the report, strategy and policy update March 2023. So do I have a Peter and a seconder, Charlie? So all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against? It's carried. Thank you very much, Elise. That was great. You know, that's really given us a really good summary. So we'll jump back up to 5.5, which is update from Whanganui Rural Community Board advocates. Now, have I got a list of people I should be asking to comment?
It's in the agenda.
Oh, there we are. So I might just ask, Judd's been very busy, so I might just ask Judd if he's got anything he would like to raise under this topic.
Kia ora, as far as application goes, and my engagement, I've been to the Castlecliff Beach clean-up last month, sporting our new high-vis jackets, which puts us on the map. David and I also attended the strategy and policy meeting before this last one, and then after that we went to visit Darren Te Umairangi. He has a very interesting business I think he's located at the Recycle Centre, and he's non-iwi affiliated, but his company, I'm not sure what it is.
I've got that written down.
Yep.
Jenny might be able to update us on that too.
Oh, just the name of it. But he was telling us that they had provided transformers to pretty much every marae up the river. I took the opportunity when we were at Haruma to go and have a look, and they did have a sizable transformer there. From our talks, we're not sure who he's actually affiliated with, but he certainly seems to have, well, he's told us he's done a volume of work on support of marae up the river as far as infrastructure of generators, and he also tells us that he's supportive of any weather event, any future weather event. Overall, it was very was quite an eye opener seeing what he's actually done and what he's got. We're not sure how he's actually funded either. But he seems to have done a
I can update
DIA.
He goes to the DIA Community-Led Development Program. He's the main sort of liaison with that funding facility. And he's TCLD, the Community-Led Development Trust, I think is the name of the organisation he runs. He used to be chair of Tama Upoko, didn't he? Darren.
Te Umarangi.
You're Maorangi. Okay.
We also with David and Peter, we attended the Tama Upoko Link, hui up at Hiruharama. That was quite an eye-opener as well as to how the Tama Upoko Link up there are engaging with their community. From the brief perspective I had of it on that particular day.
Yeah, our man here was not in good shape. Had a dodgy Indian the night before.
Yes. Following on from that, David, Mike and I met with Pakaraka Marae Chair to look at their plans of development, especially around the William Birch Park pool and the renovation, hopefully, of that site. So we're still in talks to see how we could possibly develop and support that process. And Saturday, I attended the Wuhan delegation at Backhouse that come to Whanganui. They're part of the Whanganui, the City of Design process, of which Whanganui is now a City of Design. And Wuhan come to strengthen that link, so I was invited to do the pōwhiri and to go along and see how we could further develop relationships with City of Designs around the world. And that pretty much wraps up my engagement with the community. One question. Bill and I are lodged down as civil defence. What does that role actually entail? And can anyone give me a question?
As we heard from Tim, it's a very topical subject. And I think we've got quite a lot of, this is something we should, as a group, be thinking about as to whether we can do anything to get more of a message out to our communities about civil defence. So it's something that perhaps if you would think about as to whether we can, this could be one of the things that we put a bit of effort into in the next few months while it's sort of front of everybody's mind. And liaising with Tim would be a key aspect of that. But I had a meeting with a PowerCo representative a little while ago, I think, and we're hoping to get her to present to our next meeting. And people like PowerCo can have quite an input into, we could have quite a discussion with them on civil defence responses. So I think it's a big area, and if you're in agreement, it's something I'd like to sort of put a bit more effort into, so that can be part of a future discussion.
Great, I'd support that, David.
Okay, thank you. And certainly, it was Darren, wasn't it? It sounded like they'd done a lot of work up in the river communities around civil defence. He sounded very knowledgeable on it. So, Michael, have you got any comments on the infrastructure issues that you deal with?
No.
That's all right. Yeah, no, that's fine.
The only thing I'd like to elaborate on is the birch pools. We started that off way back in my first term, so that I'm in my third term now and nothing's been done. So I think this is something we've really got to grab hold of and do something about. So I don't want to be here 6 terms to before it's done.
60.
Could I comment on that?
Certainly.
So I recall when Mr. Law was the mayor, was it back then? He's trying to sell it, but I think he had it up for sale. But I think it was effluent for the dairy. Is there quite a lot of dairy farm around there?
The main problem is the silt of the pool, silting up the
Oh, is
pool.
it just salty? I thought there was a water
Um,
quality problem too. From
Well, I just found out when I went for a haircut that in the back of the pool there's a big door what they used to open and flush the pool out. If we can get down to that door and have that open and the water running full time like it does out round the side, I think we will eliminate that problem. But it's only a matter of cleaning it, the pool out once. We did, I think the quote was something like about 6,000 to dig it out. But, you know, I'm sure that was ages, that was, you know, so many years ago.
I'm hoping that we will have something to bring to our next meeting on this. Sarah O'Hagan has promised a report, and we'll probably have another catch-up with Derek. So that could be an item that'll be on the May meeting agenda.
Yeah, I just don't want it to end up like our flying fox, just vanished into space.
No, well, of course they've got Judd. They've got Judd on the job now.
I'll be pushing it.
Yeah.
Yes, Alan, I was just going to ask you if you had any input into that.
You're not to, to interrupt your meeting a little bit. About a week ago, the Whanganui West Catchment Group met at the pool and are looking at a program to work on the Okihu stream in terms of cleaning it up with respect to both sediment and coliform bacteria in it. The parties there were, to best of my knowledge, Ngāraru, Horizons, Ministry for Environment, and DOC, I think. However, plus the members of the members of the catchment group, or steering members of that catchment group there. It's a small catchment, a small stream, but it's probably, well, it is rated as one of the poorest qualities in the whole Horizons region. They're very conscious of it. They want to fix it. We're talking about what might be done at the pool point and further up from the pool too, to help, say, trap sediment and prevent it from getting down into the pool, as member Michael has mentioned, is the big issue there. So I feel absolutely certain that the Rural Community Board, because District Council is involved there, it maintains the grounds and what they do there, would be more than welcome as a partner in that whole process, because just to try to fix that area on your own, you'll find other groups there now trying to work on the same sort of stuff. So let's put the resources together, I'd suggest. And I think a good starting point would be for the board to talk to Mike Russell, who manages the Whanganui West Catchment Group there. So that's just the stuff underway, and you guys ought to be in on it.
Kia ora, Alan. Could we get a report around that?
I
their
can.
meeting and
I'll talk to Mike about it, because I was only invited as a Horizons rep, as to what they can send you. I have an email of what we got out of that, and if I can forward that on, then I'll send that to Diane as well, and she can circulate to the board.
Excellent.
No problem.
We'll make those connections and engage with them.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
Should
Thank
be
you.
really good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We can still do it.
Yep. So perhaps Michael and Judd, are you
Yep.
happy to follow it up and make sure that we get some liaison, or get to have an input with that group?
I'll certainly follow that.
Okay, thank you. Jenny, would you like just to comment on what you're doing about the connectivity up in your area?
From now on, from today, I'll put it across the Facebook.
Yes.
Facebook page with the Facebook page, and put a panel out there if anyone would like us to visit. Sorry. And Pānui out to them if anyone would like a visit up there.
Yes.
Concerning their
So Jenny
connectivity.
pretty much knows everybody who hasn't got internet up the river, and so she's helping get those people to perhaps apply to the fund that Joe was talking about earlier on. Okay, so that's I'm down. Jenny's going to help me with connectivity because she's particularly interested in it.
Yeah.
But we've covered that really today with Joe's update. So I don't think we've got anything else to add. Unless has anyone got anything they would like to bring up under this heading of community board advocates? Okay. Well, if that's the case.
One other thing, I was questioned about the rates rise. So I've just been advocating for them to get hold of QV, and contest their valuation. Yes.
If you look at your valuation, if you look at the valuation forms that you would have got in the mail, you'll see there's a objection, or there's a process for querying it. And I've done it for one of mine. It's very straightforward.
Is it on the...
Cheerio, Alan. Thank you.
Is it on the council website, how you can do it?
It will be. Yes. And you've got till the 14th of April.
Yeah, 14th of April. You can just Google QV or ring them.
Okay, so it's then...
So the process is to devalue your property.
Yes.
That's what you'll be attempting to do. To lower your rates.
So, well, of course, not everybody wants a low valuation. If you're thinking of selling, you might want a high one.
Well, yeah.
Yes. Yes. So, are we ready? If we move, if I get a mover for the Whanganui Rural Community Board receive the reports, updates from Rural Community Board advocates, and I apologise to the minute taker. We were a little bit all over the show there, but hopefully you can put some sense to it. Okay, so I've got to move. Michael, seconder. Judd, all in favour? And against? Carried. Thank you. So before I ask Judd for the closing karakia, Sandra's beaten me to it. She obviously wasn't able to stay any longer, but Sandra's resigned, and so I'd like to thank her for her contribution over the last 6.5 years. She, Michael, Grant and I were all started at the same time, and I've really enjoyed working with her. And it's very disappointing that, presumably for health reasons, she feels she's had to resign. So I would really like to thank her for her contribution, because she has made a contribution. And every time I go to Blueskin Road from State Highway 3, I think of Sandra, because the whole 6.5 years she's been harassing us about that horrible intersection there, and she's got nowhere. So we'll have to follow it up without her. So thank you to Sandra, and so that means there will be a vacancy. And so if anybody has got any, can think of anybody that might be they might like to approach to fill that vacancy, that would be good.
So what's the process there? Tell us we have a vote.
There'll be a call for nominations.
There will be a by-election, but as with in the case of Jenny, if there's only one person,
Yes.
then we won't need to do an election.
So council will be publicly notifying a call for nominations, and if there's more than one, there'll be an election. And I've no idea what the time process is.
We'll send out all that information like we did before.
Yes. Okay, so that covers that issue. And so now I'd like to ask Judd to close the meeting with a karakia.
Certainly. Karakia to end our meeting. Unuhia ki te uru tapu nui. Kia watea, kia mama te nākau te tinana, te wairua, te ara takatū. Ko ia rā e rongo waka iri hia, ake ki runga, kia watea, ai rā, kua watea. Hau pai Māori e. Kia ora tātou.